Quick heads up, this episode involves slavery, abuse, death, and historical trauma. I'm not going to be graphic, but I am going to be honest. Every legend wants to start with a scream, but this one doesn't. This story starts with a house that looks fine, normal. It's a big house, right in the French Quarter. Balconies made for being seen, tall windows that catch the light just right, and sometimes just feels like they're watching back. This story starts with dinner parties, lace dresses, soft laughter drifting into the streets, while gaslights flicker just a little too much. It starts with people saying, "Oh, you must meet Madame LaLaurie," and meaning it as a compliment, because Delphine LaLaurie wasn't an outsider. She wasn't hiding on the edge of town. She was rich, well-connected, born into a family where power was inherited and consequences were flexible. From the outside, everything looked right, elegant, respectable, the kind of place you walk past and never imagine anything bad happening inside. But people noticed things. Not enough to accuse, not enough to act, just enough to hesitate. A glance that lingered too long, a silence where conversation should have been, the quiet, what the actual hell feeling you talk yourself out of because questioning wealthy people is uncomfortable and rarely rewarded. And for years, that's where it stayed. Whispers, unease, doors that stayed closed. Because when someone has enough money, enough status, and the right last name, silence doesn't feel dangerous. It feels normal. So before anything changes, before the city is forced to stop looking away, we need to talk about who Delphine LaLaurie was and what kind of house she really ran. Welcome back to Caffeine, Chaos, and Cuss Words, where the history is real, the chaos is intentional, and we ask one more question than polite society ever did. This is episode 14, and I'm your host with the most, Sharon. And before we go any further, a quick promise from me to you. I am not here to gaslight you. If a story exists, if people have been repeating it for generations, we're gonna talk about it, because that too becomes part of the history of a place like this. But we're going to label things honestly. If today's case sounds eerily familiar, maybe you've seen American Horror Story's rendition of it, or even watched Zach Baggins and his crew investigate the mansion on Ghost Adventures. But here at Caffeine, Chaos, and Cuss Words, what's documented is documented, what's reported is reported, and what's legend stays legend. Not because you can't handle the truth, but because you deserve it without the theatrics. So grab your coffee and let's start at the beginning. Marie Delphine, more famously known as Delphine, was born in 1787 in New Orleans. She came from the McCarthy family, part of the city's powerful Creole elite. This wasn't claw your way up money. This was the rules were built around us money. Delphine married at age 13. On June 11th, 1800, she marries a Spanish official by the name of Don Ramon de Lopez y Angulo. In 1804, the couple travels to Spain and they stop in Cuba, where Don Ramon passes away. Shortly after, Delphine gives birth to their only child, a girl, Marie Delphine Francisca Borja Lopez y Angulo, almost always called Borquita. Delphine had become a very young widow with a child, and she returns to New Orleans cushioned by status, the kind of cushion that keeps you from ever hitting the ground. I mean, she has an uncle who married into the family that was governor of Spanish Louisiana and Florida, and a cousin who served as mayor of New Orleans. In 1808, Delphine remarries Jean Blanc, a banker, lawyer, legislator, and major slave trader. With Jean Blanc, she has 4 more children, and I'm going to give you both their formal names and what they were commonly called because these names are a full workout. There was Marie Louise Pauline Blanc, usually called Pauline, Louise Marie Laurie Blanc, usually called Laurie, Marie Louise Janine Blanc, called Janine, and Jean-Pierre Paulin Blanc, known as Paulin, her only son. That's 5 children total when you include Borquita. When Jean Blanc died, Delphine did not collapse. She consolidated money, property, reputation. She managed the whole thing like a professional. Now we hit the messy part, and it's messy because it sits at the intersection of family, medicine, and rumor. Some later retellings claim that one of Delphine's daughters, the one usually identified as Pauline, had a visible physical disability, and that the family correspondence often referred to her as the hunchbacked young lady. Other accounts claim another one of the daughters was born with a serious congenital spinal condition and required ongoing care. Here's what I'm going to do because I'm not here to make things up to sound spooky. I can't verify a preserved medical diagnosis or a primary medical case file for any of the daughters. So I'm not going to slap a modern label on a 19th century child and pretend that it's research. What we can say without stretching the truth is this. Delphine moved in elite circles where physicians were a part of daily life. And her third husband, Dr. Leonard Louis Nichols LaLaurie, was a younger, French-trained doctor who entered the world in the 1820s. Some sources say that their paths crossed through medical care in the family, and that's very plausible, but it's not cleanly documented enough for me to state as fact. So here's the responsible takeaway. It's reasonable to say that there were health concerns within the family and that a physician could have been part of that orbit, but we can't responsibly claim which daughter had what condition or that medical care alone caused the marriage. But by 1825, Delphine married Dr. LaLaurie, and they formed a household that from the outside looked perfectly respectable. In 1832, Delphine and Dr. LaLaurie moved into their residence at Royal and what's now Governor Nichols. She hosted lavish parties there. But through the years, information started to surface about her mistreatment of enslaved people. New Orleans historical notes she was investigated in 1828 for cruelty toward enslaved people. And while court records for that investigation aren't found, There is documentation that she paid legal services and sold enslaved people afterwards, which is a very polite historical way of saying people noticed and she handled it quietly. So the city did what cities do when someone powerful makes them uncomfortable. It looked away. On the morning of April 10th, 1835, a fire broke out at the LaLaurie residence. A crowd gathered outside as it burned, and this is where the story stops being about the fire. Because when doors were forced open, what was found inside didn't expose a secret that had started just that morning. It exposed a household protected for decades. The fire did not create the horror, it just made it impossible to ignore. Firefighters discovered 7 enslaved people locked away in the upper rooms. According to the New Orleans Bee, they were described as more or less horribly mutilated. Accounts described victims who were emaciated, showing evidence consistent with prolonged starvation, and people who were restrained or confined. The point is not graphic detail. The point is the pattern. This was sustained abuse, not just a single moment. Firefighters removed the survivors and brought them to the cabildo. And this matters because the victims weren't hidden away afterwards. They were publicly visible. According to reporting summarized by New Orleans Historical, a crowd of 4,000 gathered at the cabildo, and when no immediate arrest followed, when it became clear that consequences were still uncertain, the crowd turned on the house itself. People forced their way back to Royal Street and tore into what the fire hadn't already taken. Furniture dragged into the street and smashed. Doors ripped from frames, windows shattered, interior woodwork pulled apart. Contemporary accounts and later historians describe the home as nearly demolished by the mob. Delphine and her family fled, first towards Lake Pontchartrain, then eventually out of the country. Delphine escaped New Orleans and lived in France. Sources agree on that outline. They disagree on the exact details of her death. 64 parishes state she died December 7th, 1849, and was interred in Paris, with later reinterment in New Orleans. History.com presents a different belief about her death timing in Paris. So the clean, honest statement is she fled, she lived in France, and she died there. But some details vary by source. After the mob, the original structure was ruined, and here's something ghost tours love to blur. The building people point to today is not the original LaLaurie house. According to the Preservation Resource Center, the original was destroyed, and by 1838, a new 3-story Empire-style building was constructed on the site, and that new building served many purposes. During the Reconstruction era, it served as an integrated school. During the 1880s, it was a conservatory of music. In the late 1800s, guidebooks and newspapers were already calling it the haunted house. From 1923 to 1932, it was run as the Warrenton House to help indigent men. Then it changed again. Apartments, private residences, owners coming and going. The address stayed heavy. And in modern era, the house got a celebrity chapter. The Preservation Resource Center notes that Nicolas Cage bought the property for about $3.4 million and later lost it to foreclosure. Some reporting also says that Nicolas Cage bought the home in hopes that the atmosphere would inspire a horror novel, which allegedly never happened. Either way, it wasn't long term. It was a chapter, and then the house moved on again. Today, 1140 Royal Street is privately owned and not opened for public tours. People can view it from the outside. The property was listed for $10.25 million in 2024 and sold for $6 million in October of 2024, according to New Orleans City Business and major real estate listings. And just when you thought we were done, now we're going to move into the hauntings. And here's how we're going to do this without being weird about it. Some of the stories that you have heard, apparitions, a woman with a whip, unexplained bruises, screams, shadows, those are part of the folklore attached to this address. Folklore matters because it shows how people try to live next to trauma. But I'm going to label it honestly. If it's backed by records, I'll tell you. If it's a later story with no paper trail, I'll tell you that too. Because you deserve the whole picture. And the whole picture is just this. Places like this don't just hold history. They hold what people couldn't say out loud. One of the most persistent stories involves a 12-year-old enslaved girl who died after falling from the roof while being chased. Some sources report this incident as part of the pre-fire pattern of cruelty. Later, people began reporting a childlike figure near the upper levels, quick movement, footsteps, and a sense of presence. There are also stories about chains, voices, cold spots, the standard haunted house language people reach for when something feels wrong. And yes, at one point the building served as a school. That is documented. But stories about students seeing a lady with a whip or unexplained bruising do not appear in documented school records that we can point to today. Those are later reports and retellings, part of how the legend grew around this address. And that doesn't mean they're worthless. It means they tell us something different. Not necessarily what literally happened, but what people needed the story to hold. You don't have to believe in ghosts to understand why this house feels heavy. The LaLaurie mansion isn't unsettling because it might be haunted. It's unsettling because it shows what happens when wealth and silence protect cruelty long enough to rot. If you want to support the show, all of our links, socials, websites, and Patreon are right here at linktree/chaos crew pod. That's linktr.ee/chaos crew pod. And of course, shout out to our sponsor, Dubby Energy, fueling my chaos one cup at a time. Get your Dubby Energy drink at dubby.gg and use my promo code Caffeine Crew for 10% off of your order. This episode was written, narrated, and produced by yours truly. And until next time, stay caffeinated, stay chaotic, and remember, when everyone insists that nothing is wrong, that's usually when it's time to take a closer look. Until next time, this has been a Busy House production.